When we talk about coffee origin, it's often like a postcard. Ethiopia, Colombia, Panama, the Philippines. We learn the name of a mountain, a region, a valley, and that feels like enough. But origin is more than a place. Origin is people. In the Philippines, origin is often a community of farmers who've been tending the same trees on the same steep hillsides for generations. From what I've seen, often without roads, and from what I've heard, often without recognition. This video is about one of those places. And more importantly, it's about what we learned and experienced from the people who live there and the people who work with them. This is episode 1 in our series discovering the Philippine coffee origin story. High up in the mountains of Ilocos Sur is a small municipality most Filipinos have never visited. You may have heard of Sigay for Awasin Falls, but it's also home to some of the most remarkable Robusta coffee in the country. This is Barangay San Elias, and I traveled here to learn as much as I could about coffee from the people and their stories. I didn't come back with simple answers. Actually, I think I left with more questions, but also, undeniably, a much deeper understanding of what it takes to actually produce an excellent cup of coffee, and a real belief that the story of San Elias Sigay holds lessons for the entire Philippine coffee industry. We started our journey in La Union and drove about 3 hours north to Amian Cafe in Candon, where we met Sir Mike Hernando. Mike is one of the small handful of evolved Q graders in the Philippines, a rigorous international certification for coffee quality evaluation, as well as a coffee processor, and one of the directors of the Philippine Coffee Guild. For years, Mike has been making regular trips to San Elias, working directly with the farmers there, teaching best practices, and helping them understand the science behind what they already do intuitively. He invited us to join a workshop he was running with the farmers, focused on using yeast to improve fermentation, extend the shelf life of their green beans, and ultimately help them command better prices for their work. Most coffee drinkers, myself included for a long time, associate quality with geography. In the Philippines, you see names like Sagada or Batangas on the grocery shelves, and those reputations have become valuable brands. On the jeep ride up the mountain and over this ravine, Sarah of Amian Cafe, an Ilocos coffee brand that sources coffee from this community, shared with me how years back, the coffee farmers here would sell their coffees as far as Batangas, and it would be labeled as a generic coffee. That was before Sigay became one of the most in-demand local coffees. Now, they just can't get enough. Last year, 6 of the 10 coffees in the Robusta category came from a single municipality, Sigay. 6 out of 10 from this small mountain community. These aren't coffees that won because of clever marketing or a famous name. They won because of quality. When you say my coffee placed in the top 10 nationally, you're no longer just a farmer trying to sell cherries at whatever price the middleman offers. You become a producer with a reputation. And that reputation is the foundation of something that the specialty coffee world calls direct trade. Buyers who come to you, who want your coffee specifically, and who are willing to pay a premium for it. It was off to the farms. We walked past fields of palay, and like with so many coffee farms around the Philippines, the concrete path just kinda ended. From there, we were hiking, watching our step, ducking under branches, and climbing into a proper Robusta forest. This felt absolutely magical. The coffee trees literally towered over you, and wildlings covered the forest floor. The locals aren't entirely sure how coffee first arrived in these mountains. The most popular theory is that the wind or birds just brought the seeds into this area, and the farmers have been cultivating what was naturally brought there ever since. In most cases around the Philippines, farmers have to test different species and varieties on their land to see which thrives. This coffee wasn't engineered into this landscape. It naturally found its way here and flourished. And the way it grows here is fundamentally different from industrial coffee farming. In countries where coffee is grown at scale, you'll see flat lands, monocultures, coffee grown in neat rows. And this kind of intercropping and biodiversity isn't just aesthetically beautiful, it's ecologically intelligent. The forest canopy provides shade that regulates temperature and protects the soil. The biodiversity supports the insect populations that the trees depend on. These are farming practices that support the long-term health of the land, and they're practices that large-scale industrial agriculture has largely abandoned in the name of short-term efficiency. There's a real irony there. The farmers of San Elias, with fewer resources and less institutional support than almost any coffee producer on the global stage, are practicing something closer to sustainable agriculture than most of the industry. Some of the trees were so tall, we had to use a kawi, a long bamboo pole with a hook at the end, to bend the branches down within reach. Unlike bananas, which you can pick green because they continue to ripen after harvest, coffee cherries stop ripening the moment they leave the tree. You can't pick early and hope for the best. You have to wait until each cherry is ready, and then make the hike again.
Mulam. Sweet. Taribo?
Several of the farmers that we joined on this trip were nearly 70 years old. I couldn't help but see my lolo and lolas in them. Imagine a 70-year-old man or woman hiking steep mountain trails, pulling trees down with a bamboo pole, sorting cherries. You can't help but feel concerned. But then I was reminded that this is their craft. They're proud to be doing this work. For them, the quality of their coffee is a source of genuine identity and joy. Coffee farming is their passion, and age isn't something they're letting stop them. But it does raise a harder question. Many of these farmers can no longer harvest every tree they have. They have real physical limits on what they can carry back down from the mountain. And when they look around at the next generation, at their children and grandchildren, many of those young people aren't there anymore. They've moved to the cities looking for work, for connectivity, for opportunity, which is completely understandable, but it creates a real threat. The knowledge these farmers carry about when to harvest, how to ferment, which trees produce the best fruit, about their land, it's not written down anywhere. It lives in the hands and memories of people who learned it from their parents, who learned it from theirs, and if that chain breaks, it breaks. And that's not something you can Google or ChatGPT back into existence. So the work that's being done in Sigay, the competitions, the workshops, the direct trade relationships, it isn't just about better prices today. It's about making coffee farming a viable, dignified, sustainable livelihood for the next generation. The only way to give young people a reason to stay or return to the farm is to give them something worth staying for. Recognition, economic stability, a community that's valued, not invisible. While a coffee's quality might begin with the land it grows on, the altitude, the soil, the rainfall, the way the sun travels in the sky above the trees, so much of what ends up in your cup is actually the result of decisions made by human hands, by Filipinos. When to harvest, how to sort, how to ferment, how long, under what conditions. Those are not accidents of geography. Those are skills and choices that belong to the farmer and coffee processor. Ilocos coffee isn't just good because it grows in Ilocos. It's good because of the people here. And that distinction matters enormously. After harvesting, it was time to process the cherries. And this is where coffee gets genuinely fascinating. First, we floated the cherries, submerged them in water, and any cherry that floats has to be removed. Density here is a proxy for quality. A floating cherry means the seed inside is likely defective, underdeveloped, dried out, or damaged by pests. It sounds like a small detail, but it's an act of quality control. Then we sorted by color. While color isn't a perfect measure for sugar content, it's a pretty good one. The deeper the red, the more developed the sugars inside. We spent a good hour organizing the cherries into different batches. And uniformity matters enormously in processing, because you want every cherry to respond to fermentation in exactly the same way. If you're starting with mixed material, some cherries ripe, some not, you can't control the outcome. Consistency in your raw material is the foundation of consistency in a cup of coffee. Some might find this work tedious, but I was finding it quite meditative. And the farmers, they were finding it really joyful. Harvest comes once a year, and when it does, everyone shows up. Hours of sorting cherries by color is when storytelling happens, when all the chismis comes out. The labor and the community are inseparable. Which brings me to something that I think about a lot. Normally when you buy a bag of coffee in the Philippines, there's one name on it. One brand, maybe one farm. And there's nothing wrong with that, that's how retail works. But in reality, that bag of coffee represents the labor of an entire web of people. Farmers who lent each other their kawit, neighbors who came to help sort. Coffee fermentation is a whole world of its own. And as a biochemist, I think it's the part that excites me the most. Coffee cherries naturally carry wild yeasts on their skin. Those yeasts drive fermentation, and fermentation is what develops those complex flavors that make a coffee remarkable. But every farmer has their own approach to managing those conditions. Temperature, duration, oxygen levels, the vessel that they use. In a community like San Elias, those processing techniques are really heavily guarded. Locals, they call them their secret recipes. What Mike Hernando introduced at the workshop was an inoculated yeast, a specific strain added deliberately to the fermentation to create more controlled and predictable conditions. Adding new yeast doesn't override the natural fermentation, but it shifts the environment in which it occurs. We activated the yeast together and then, scoop by scoop, sprayed the cherries before sealing them in bags for fermentation. The practical benefit Mike was teaching us was about extending the shelf life of the green bean, helping the coffee stay in optimal condition for longer, which opens up more options for when and how farmers sell. But the deeper lesson was about something else, the relationship between knowledge and confidence. Coffee education is expensive. Formal courses, Q grader certifications, access to cupping labs, these are things that exist largely in cities, largely for buyers and roasters and baristas. The number of programs that bring that education all the way down to the farm level to the people who are doing the most physically demanding and technically consequential work in the value chain. That number is very small, which is why watching these farmers at this workshop wasn't just interesting, it was emotional. These are people who've been producing award-winning coffee for years, often through intuition, shared knowledge, and experimentation, without anyone sitting down and explaining to them the science of what they're doing and why it works. Giving someone that framework doesn't replace what they already know. Nobody needs to tell them how to produce a solid cup of coffee. They're already the best in the country, and maybe some of the best in the world. But it gives them the vocabulary to understand their own expertise. The success story of Sigay should be a case study for the Philippine coffee industry. The success of Sigay didn't happen by accident. It happened because of the specific intersection of several things that rarely align. Passionate farmers who are always improving their craft, the consistency of buyers like Amian Cafe and El Union who kept coming back and paying fairly, a competition infrastructure through the PCQC that gave those farmers a stage and a mechanism for recognition, roads that connected a remote mountain community to markets, and people like Mike Hernando, who believed that education belonged on the farm, not just in the city. Remove any of those elements, and the story changes. What Philippine coffee farmers actually need is infrastructure, partnerships, and a genuine stake in the value they create. There's a version of the Philippine coffee story where Sigay is the exception, a lucky conversion of factors that can't be replicated. And there's a version where Sigay is the proof of concept, evidence that when you invest in farmers with knowledge, market access, and consistent recognition, they will do the rest. I know which version I believe. And I think the farmers of San Elias have already made an argument for it, one competition placement at a time. The next time I held a cup of coffee, I was thinking about being on that mountainside with a bamboo pole pulling a tree down to myself. Or about the 70-year-old farmer who continues to make those hikes because it's his life's work. Or about the hours we spent sorting. And that made me ask, when I see a 10 or 20 peso cup of coffee, do I think twice about the people who might have been behind that? If my coffee is this cheap, what does that mean for the farmers? This is Tim Drinks Coffee, where coffee meets contemplation.